welcome everyone who's joining us either live or later on through the wonders of the internet and cable TV. My name is Barb Hedrick. I am the current Vice President of the League of Women Voters of the Red River Valley, and we are happy today to bring you a voter forum between the two Democratic primary candidates for Minnesota District 4A in the Minnesota State House, Chuck Henderson and Heather Keeler. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan institution which seeks to educate voters and bring as much activity and action and education as possible to all voters, and these voter forums are one way we do this. Usually in the past, we operate with an audience to ask us questions, but in the pandemic era here, we have solicited questions ahead of time, which neither candidate has seen, and they will be asked. We will ask as many as we can in this session, with each candidate getting a chance to respond to each question. We will begin with a 1-minute opener from each of the candidates, and we'll start with Chuck Hendrickson.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters. I got my glasses on steam here. Okay, it's good. My name's Chuck Hendrickson. I've been a resident of Moorhead for 17 years. I have a Bachelor of Arts from Concordia and a Master's of Business from the University of Mary. I've been on the Moorhead City Council for 7 years, and the last year I've been Mayor Pro Tem. I've worked with our state legislators on many different infrastructure projects, including the 21st Underpass, the 11th Underpass, and our transfer station, which is currently in the bonding bill right now. As a member of the Economic Development Authority, I've worked to revitalize our downtown. I was instrumental in, as a member of the Clay County Solid Waste Advisory Committee, in establishing no-sort recycling. And I was recently endorsed by Education Minnesota. So, like I said, thank you for tuning in, and thank you to the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. Heather?
I'm Heather Keeler. I am the DFL endorsed candidate, again running for House 4A. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for putting this on and making it so accessible. I keep saying that trying to make a virtual world personalized is a fun challenge that we're all faced with. So a little bit about me. I've worked to serve our underrepresented populations for 20 plus years. I sit as the vice chair of our Human Rights Commission. One of the biggest things I've done in our community a year ago was I led the effort to pass Indigenous Peoples Day. So not only passing it to make it a city holiday, actually created this massive event within our community about education and inclusion. I graduated with my bachelor's from MSUM in project management, and then went right on into my master's with educational leadership. I believe that collaboration is how we create change, and so through this campaign I've spent many hours talking to hundreds of our community members to build relationships, but also working to build those relationships on a state level with current legislators. I actually have an event this Sunday with our Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan and Aaron Murphy. So just working on relationships in our community and also across the state to create change.
Thank you. Now we will move on to questions. Again, these were submitted ahead of time by anyone who saw the solicitations that we posted out. And we will start with Heather for the first one, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer.
Okay.
And I think now, if you want to, you can just leave your mask down.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that'll be easier. I think we're spaced up enough that we can do that.
Thanks.
Joining the legislature means traveling far from home, away from your families, and into the political fray in St. Paul. What about this job appeals to you?
Well, I do have a family, and so there is an element of teamwork in this. I have an amazing support system here to help me throughout the campaign, but also as we create this journey moving ahead. The biggest thing that appeals to me is the opportunity to be a voice for change. I grew up not seeing people who looked like me in all kinds of areas, whether it was as our teachers, as legislators, as law enforcement. And so for me, when Ben announced his retirement, it was the opportunity to step up, be an example for our next generation, be a voice at the table so that we're more inclusive in our decision making, because I think when we're inclusive, that means that we have people from all over life, different lenses of life that are helping to make those decisions. I think that that's appealing, but also it's appealing to be part of creating change for the next generations. So hopefully it's not something that we just implement for right now or this year, but it's something that we're really planting the seeds to make change for the future in policy, but also in change in who our leaders might be.
Thank you. Chuck?
Spending the time away from my family. Fortunately, I do have 2 kids in St. Paul right now. Well, one in Minneapolis and one in St. Paul, 2 college kids. But I have little ones at home too. I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. So it's going to be, it'll be a little bit sad leaving them if I make it to the legislature. But, if I have a chance to make improve the state of Minnesota, make it better for our kids, I'm willing to make that sacrifice for my children. Moorhead's on a momentous role right now, and with our infrastructure projects and with our schools and with our parks, they're all doing very well, and I think I can continue that momentum in that state capital. But like I said, if it means time away from my kids where I get a chance to make Moorhead even better, I'm willing to make that sacrifice.
Thank you. Now, Chuck, you will get the next question, and this one is actually sent specifically to you, but Heather, you may answer if you wish, or whatever you want to do. Why did you decide to continue to run after the DFL endorsement process?
There's a couple different answers to that. I've always wanted to serve in the state legislature. I watched my dad. He was Mayor of Warroad for 10 years, and my mom was Roseville County DFL chair. And I watched him in public service, and so I stepped up and ran 7 years ago, and I've really enjoyed it, and we've accomplished a lot in Moorhead. We've accomplished our business climate is upticking, good infrastructure projects. Moorhead's on a roll, but I think if I go to the state level, I can make that even better. So, so when I didn't get the endorsement, it was sad, but I stepped up and I told people I'm gonna go to the primary because I want to continue to serve Moorhead and just work at the state level, and I think that's the next stage for me. One thing that helped me out is I have a strong family. And they said, and I asked them, I said, after the endorsement, should I still move on? And I talked to all my kids and my family, and they said, yes, absolutely, Dad. You should move. You should keep going. You should run to the primary. And with their encouragement, and the foundation with a strong wife and a strong family unit, I decided to go towards the primary.
Thank you, Heather. Do you want to answer that in any way?
I respect Chuck's decision. I think that it's allowed me the opportunity to step up and prove that I'm serious about this as well. It's had the opportunity for me to highlight my work ethic and the fact that we went through ranked choice voting for the endorsement and I won by 67%. Shows that I had the support through the DFL. I respect the DFL and I respect their process. And so that's, I guess, where I sit with it. I think that it's come with an opportunity. A lot of people didn't know that we were even going to a primary, or also that Ben retired. And so I think it's allowed the opportunity for the community to really get involved.
Okay, thank you. You would not be surprised that we got multiple questions related to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to keep it to 2 or 3. We'll start with this one because I thought this was an interesting take on it. How was the coronavirus personally? I guess Heather, you're first now.
Okay.
How was the coronavirus personally affected your family, and how does that influence your opinions related to the reopening of schools, our state mask mandate, and how we can best protect the long-term economic health of our citizens?
That's a lot of different questions in one. Yeah. So I guess to start, for me, how it's affected my family, I've been really lucky that nobody in my immediate family has been affected. But extended family-wise, I come from a population that we are underserved in healthcare systems. And so the biggest thing that I fear is that if we end up testing positive, or that we've come in contact with other people who are from these underserved populations in our healthcare systems, we see that our minority individuals have much higher impacts than some of the other populations. And so for me personally, I've been able to stay safe. I've been able to work from home. It didn't affect me in my job, so that was really nice. So as far as like the financial impact, I've been really blessed with the opportunity to continue to work from home. As far as going back to school, I think this is a much bigger conversation. I think that we need to trust the lead that we've had from our governor and the outlines that they've set for us. I know that our school's been really diligent in communicating that there is a plan that's going to be distributed on the 17th, and that we all just have to play a role in knowing that things can change in a minute, and we have to be able to roll with it. I think our school and our teachers did an amazing job. Literally, it was like March 15th, and then Monday we were home distance learning. I think our teachers and our education staff did an amazing job transitioning that, and so I think we just need to trust that system. As far as the mask mandate, I was in favor of it. I mentioned that when I was highlighted in the Star Tribune with the governor's decision prior to actually making the mask mandate. I think that it's important for all of us to play a role in keeping our community safe. It's part of why I'm not door knocking, that I'm just doing phone calls. I've been wearing a mask as long as we've been talking about masks. So I think it's just something we all need to get on board with to make sure that we keep our community healthy and safe.
Thank you, Chuck.
You know what, first of all, with that last question, I'll come back to that. There's 100 Democrats who decided the candidates out of, I don't know how many Democrats in Moritz. So I just want to make that perfectly clear, too, at the DFL endorsing convention. But with how the pandemic's personally affected me, my daughter had it. And she was home on spring break, and she got a call. She was at a friend's house, and one of her friends had the coronavirus. So she came home to Moorhead, and our whole family is exposed. And she originally got tested and had a false negative, and so she went back to the Twin Cities, and then she got a call saying it was a positive. So our family was quarantined for 2 weeks, and that was right after I declared my candidacy for District 4A. So we were quarantined for 2 weeks, and I was scared. My family, my daughter was sick. She kind of isolated herself, but she had a cough and a fever, and we were scared. We didn't know what the pandemic was going to be about. So, but fortunately, everything's good now. She's healthy. She donated plasma, so she's doing a world of good from this pandemic. And I think my son Max had it too, but we weren't sure. We didn't get him tested, but he had a fever and a cough. So it was pretty stressful times. Now, speaking of Max, and I have a son, Gavin, too, he didn't get sick. But going back to school, I think our number one priority should be to keep our students safe, period. We need to keep our students safe. We need to make sure there's enough PPE equipment, teachers. We need to do the social distancing. We got to make sure our students are very safe. And, I agree with Governor Walz with the 3 phases, the hybrid, the in-school, and the remote. I agree with that. I think that's a good plan. And long-term economic health for our citizens, we need to take care of our citizens too. A lot of people lost their jobs, so we got to find ways to make sure they make ends meet. We don't, they can pay their rents, they can pay their mortgages. We just need to take care of our citizens in the state of Minnesota, and we need to take care of our families, which I did during that time. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So now for the we're going to do 2 more questions related to this. Each of them about basically about what you think the legislature should concentrate on when it gets back into session after the election. Related to the pandemic and economic woes, what do you think should be the legislature's priorities? Should it be something, and this is from the question, so I'm going to use these as examples. Should it be something like strengthening food security through as much as possible? Should it be about replenishing the supplies of PPE, as you mentioned a moment ago? Or do you think some other aspect should be the top priority for the legislature, and what it should be working on related to the pandemic once it meets again after the election?
Is it my turn? Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that question. I think the top priority should be to keep our citizens safe and healthy. And we should have, we should be well suited for PPE. Everybody should have it. And I think the mandatory mask rule, I think they should keep continuing with that. I know that's Governor Walz's call. But, to lessen the pandemic, to lower the curve, we need to mask up, and we need to take care of our citizens, both economically and health-wise too. You could see with our healthcare system throughout the country and Minnesota, there's holes there because people are getting sick, they're not getting tested. I think Minnesota is doing a pretty good job testing right now. But we need to have more testing. We need to lower that curve, and I think the legislature should concentrate on concentrating on healthcare and lowering that curve, and economically making sure their citizens are economically fit, so they're not, so they can pay their mortgages, so they can pay their rent, and just make sure we keep moving along in our economy. It's going to take a hit, but we need to keep that economy going too. So. And one last thing too, I think the legislature I don't think the bonding bill is going to be passed by November. So they should take a long look at that bonding bill and see what they can pass. If it's COVID, if it's the CARES Act, where we're getting money from the federal government, giving it to cities so they can take care of their citizens. They should be concentrating on the bonding bill and the CARES Act too.
Thank you, Heather.
Although I think that food security is extremely important in this, I think that it's important that we keep roofs over our heads. So I would really push for the eviction freezes. When we have people that are losing jobs and they can't pay their rent, if we kick them out of their houses, we're just setting them back even further. But I think that one thing, and I think Chuck mentioned this, is that we've seen the cracks in our healthcare system. And one of the conversations we've been having is single payer healthcare, because we want everybody to have access to quality care. We see that people, are tested, and I will say I'm really glad that your family stayed healthy, because we've seen, the outcomes that could have been much different. So I think that's a fact that it is in our community, and we need to be safe. But I think as far as state legislative conversation is really pushing the single payer insurance. Because I think that we see people who don't go see the doctor because they don't have insurance or they don't have access. And though we have free testing sites, I think we need to continue to have that. We also need to find a way to communicate with our most vulnerable populations, whether that's our homeless population. If they're coming in and they're getting tested and they don't have phones or they don't have ways to contact them through email. What does that system look like? And are we making sure that we're not violating HIPAA by telling, friend on the street, if you see so-and-so, tell them to come in, but be sure you're careful if you come in contact with them. Just making sure that we're thinking much bigger, because it's one thing to have the resources to make sure that our community's safe. It's another thing to develop the system that we can make sure that we're making changes that we stay safe. I don't think the pandemic's going away, by January by any means. I think it's something that we're going to have to deal with for a long time. And so I would say that the biggest thing would be pushing for that single payer insurance, making sure that we have the eviction freezes, free testing, and then again the economic support, so that our businesses just don't suffer, and that we can have them here when we come back and we're healthy.
Thank you. Heather, we will actually turn now to the economic question. This questioner asks, it seems that investing in small businesses will be a key component of climbing out of the economic tumult that we are in now during the pandemic. Please provide one or two specific concrete examples of how you would invest, promote, and sustain small business development in Moorhead.
Mm-hmm. I'll start by saying I love our small businesses. It's one of the things that I try to support, individually as a family. We don't really go across the river to, get dinner or food or anything like that. So, I think right now the biggest thing we can do is just support, whether that's, buying bigger gift cards for future investments individually. But from the bigger picture, I think we really have to understand that we're a border city, and it's an easy option for people to say, there's different restrictions across the river. There's different tax cuts, or, we maybe wouldn't pay as much in taxes if we just went across the river. So I think that it's important for us to have a voice to keep our border city tax credits available, but I think that we also need to look at grant funding. I think we need to look at economic grant funding for our super small businesses, which are like 6 or less people, minority businesses, women businesses, veteran-owned businesses, new American businesses, so that we grow this space in Moorhead that people really enjoy being here, and that we kind of have a draw to come over here. Because right now I feel like a lot of our community just tends to go across the river, and we lose a lot of that economic development here. And we see businesses, amazing businesses, open up and shut down within a year. And the pandemic has created an extra if some of our businesses experienced a loss because of COVID, but it was a very lottery type of a thing. And from the conversations that I've had with some of our small business owners, they haven't seen that grant awarded. So just making sure that we continue to be a voice, that our greater Minnesota needs to be seen, our border city needs to be seen, because it's really important that we help Moorhead grow. And so I know that we are predicted, our 10-year prediction is to be potentially 30% growth, which is still less than the state average. So I just think we need to really be vocal about investing in small, beautiful Minnesota.
Thank you. Chuck?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. It seems that investing in small businesses will be a key component of climbing out of the economic tumult that we are in now during the pandemic. Please provide 1 to 2 specific concrete examples of how you would invest, promote, sustain small business development in Moorhead.
One thing I would do is work with our senators and work with the Paycheck Protection Plan. I know that's funded federally, and we need to extend that to our businesses so they can pay their employees, so we can take care of our people who work at those small businesses. I'd also work with our federal senators too, Senator Smith and Senator Klobuchar, about small business loans. Make those available at a low interest rate so our businesses can survive and they can keep in business past COVID. And we're not sure when that's going to happen. I've heard stories where it's been, we're not going to be out of this for 2 years. It could be anywhere from 10 years. So we need to plan to make sure our businesses are taken care of. And one thing I do want to offer is everybody in Moorhead should be patronizing our small businesses. We do have great small business. I agree with Heather. Great restaurants, great stores, great shops. We should be patronizing those businesses and just helping them out. But the Payment Protection Plan, the federal, like I said, I'd work with the senators on that, and the small business loans, and then low interest small business loans, so these businesses can stay going and keep viable during this, during this horrific period. It's a tough period for business right now, and we need to work with them, and we need to keep them going.
Okay, thank you. Now, Chuck, we move on to something a little bit different. Infrastructure. Not only the big projects such as the underpass on 11th Street and other road construction and maintenance issues, but what types of infrastructure needs do you see as an overall vision for Moorhead? More sidewalks to promote healthy walking? Greater use of unoccupied retail or business space?
Yes. No, one thing that we need right now, and it's in the current bonding bill, and I sit on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, is we need a new transfer station. It's not glamorous, it's not glitzy, but it's 40 years old, and it's shovel ready, and it's north of town, but we need to get that transfer station taken care of, and I've been preaching that for 7 years on the city council. We need to keep the no-sort recycling going, and that's part of infrastructure. I helped initiate that when I was on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and I worked with our Public Works Director, Steve Moore, trying to get that initiated. And bike paths. We need to make bike paths connectable throughout the city. People love to bike. You can bike down by the river. We need to connect them, and we need to connect them to Fargo too, so people have that freedom to, exercise and do those bike paths. And take care of our roads too. We have been doing a good job taking care of our roads in the past 5 years, we need to keep that going too, because when we take care of our roads, we replace sewer pipe and water pipe and electric and cable and anything else. So if we could take care of all that in one stint, I think that's a good thing. So if we replace a road, we can place anything that's under there. Like, say, for example, like cast iron pipes too. We replace all those if we replace a road. And, it's a good thing. So we need to invest in our infrastructure, because if you have a strong infrastructure, you have a strong city. And I really believe that. And like I said, I think we're doing a fine job right now, but, we just need to keep that going. And we need money from the state, so I would work hard to get money for Moorhead for those infrastructure projects.
Thank you. Heather?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. They're asking about infrastructure, not only the big projects such as the underpass on 11th Street and other road construction and maintenance issues, but what types of infrastructure needs do you see as an overall vision for Moorhead? More sidewalks to promote healthy walking? Greater use of unoccupied retail or business space?
Well, first, I'll just say that I think Chuck's done a great job at his work, and the group effort to lead the effort for infrastructure. And so I believe in relationships, and I believe in collaboration. And so moving forward, if elected, I would continue to work with that group that's done that work. For me, I think that it's really the bike path thing is great. I think that I have kids that ride bikes up and down 12th, and it's so scary. They're like right on the side of the road, right next to these big semis and trucks that are passing by. And right now, because of the underpass construction, more cars are going up and down that street. And so it's safety not only for our kids, but also people who don't live in a privileged space to have a vehicle. So making sure that we have bike paths that are connected, walking spaces that are wide enough and safe, but also that all of our spaces are ADA accessible. There's a lot of times that we go for walks and they don't have the ramps at every corner, so that it's not easy for all of our individuals in our community to get around. I think that a lot of the decisions that we make in infrastructure maybe come from this lens of, if I have a car, I want to be able to get around town. And we have to be mindful that we have a lot of population here that doesn't have that privilege. And so just making sure that when we do infrastructure, we're thinking about our walking population, the population who really relies on ADA accessibility, but also like our youth and play areas. We need to invest in our next generation. We need to invest in the fact that there needs to be activity opportunities here for us. When we work with Hope Inc., they have to go across the bridge a lot for some of the opportunities for there. I know that we have our baseball field here that they're able to play, but hockey, they can't even use our own hockey space. So just making sure that we're creating spaces, whether they're outdoor play spaces, outdoor activity spaces, roads, obviously. I think that roads need to be up to date because, again, if you're going over potholes over and over, that ends up being an individual cost. If we're wrecking our tires and wrecking our vehicle just to make sure that we can continue to drive on the roads. But the solid waste transfer station, I also agree, that's a priority. That's a red zone building. That means that it's not useful. It's not a place that is overly compliant for the employees that are working there. And I know that we have our land secured and permit secured right now. And so just making sure that we move forward with that.
Okay. And now a question involving public colleges and universities. Heather, starts with you. What will you do to support our public colleges and universities not only in general funding, but more specifically to help students directly in terms of both support and affordability?
Sure, this is a question that's really close to me. I didn't have the opportunity to go back to earn my bachelor's until I was in my 30s because it wasn't something financially that I or my family could afford. And so recently, we had huge cuts in higher education. And part of that is because we ended up in almost a $54 million deficit from the original budget when we looked at higher education. Higher education is our fourth biggest line item that the state has committed to, and when we are in such a deficit, of course we're going to fill the cuts. We're already paring back to bare bones when it comes to education, yet when we look out in the professional world, you almost need higher education just to get some of those jobs. And so when we see the population that this affects the most, it's our underserved populations who need those supports to go to school, that they need to be able to have access to higher education. I don't believe that higher education should be a privilege. I think it should be an opportunity for everybody. So for me, I would really push to make sure that that stays a priority in our line items, and then we stick to the budget that we have committed to our universities. We have 37 colleges and universities across this state. It's one thing that in Moorhead alone we're very proud of. I love that I went to school here. I think Chuck would agree. This is a great place to grow up and go to school, and a lot of our individuals stay here and become professionals, so we have to invest in higher ed. When we look at what our income is made up of, over 19% of our population is employed by an education system. So not only is it investing in the individuals who want to go to school as higher ed, it's also investing in our professors and the people who are working within those systems. Other things I would add is the supports that we need outside of just the classroom. One of the things that I talk about is the fact that we have a lot of domestic violence and human trafficking happening within our higher ed systems, and when we pare back all those support systems, we're not really helping our individuals get through higher education to success because it's more than just academics.
Thank you. Chuck?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to repeat the question.
Sure. What will you do to support our public colleges and universities not only in general funding, but more specifically to help students directly in terms of both support and affordability?
Well, I have two kids in college, not necessarily in Moorhead, but like I said, in the Twin Cities, and there's a crunch. Yeah, we need to fully fund our schools, and I think the state legislature needs to take hold of that. You saw the cuts at MSUM this year, and you know it was tough. It's a tough thing to swallow when you have to cut professors, and a lot of the students are going back. And I realize there's a lot of external forces there going against it, but we need to bring that funding back up to where it was, so we can hire those teachers back. We need to lower tuition too. A lot of students are struggling with tuition right now, and families are struggling. I pay for some of my son's tuition. He takes loans out because I can't afford to. He goes to the University of Minnesota, so you know, and that's not cheap. But and like with Moorhead too, Moorhead State and the schools around here aren't cheap too. And so we need to fully fund and give our students, you know, different grants, different loans, low interest loans. We can't be, you know, some of these banks and some of these institutions are making money off our students, and that's a terrible thing. We need to provide more funding for our students in terms of loans and grants, and just make sure they can go to school. I'm glad I have a 4-year education, and I wish in a master's degree, and I hope and I wish that for all the kids in the city and the state, that they can afford college, and when they're done with college, hopefully they don't have to go home and live with their parents, because that's a problem right now too. And so if we make it affordable for our students and they can get good paying jobs, when they do graduate, they don't have to come home. They can still live that independent life and come and visit us once in a while. I hope, Hannah and Marty, if you're watching, you can come visit me once in a while. But, you know, just make it more affordable. We need to, in all, we just need to fund our higher education institutions, and we got to make it more affordable for our students.
Thank you. Chuck, you get this question to start with. There's a lot of discussion regarding defunding the police in the state. What is your view on what defunding the police means in terms of actual policy changes? If you support a reduction in police funding, where should those funds go?
Actually, I do not support defunding the police. I think we should actually add more resources for them. And, you know, in Moorhead right now, we have a part-time mental health counselor who interacts with our police department, because, you know, our police officers go through a lot during their shifts, and they see a lot of violence and that type of thing, and they don't know, and, you know, you need somewhere to vent, and that's why we, you know, worked on that part-time counselor for our police department right now. So we should add funds for that. I know for sure that's when these police officers go on calls too, there's a language barrier some of the times. So we know we need to invest in translators. We need to invest in people who can come out and, you know, help translate what's going on with any situation. And so I'm not for defunding. I'm actually for giving them more funds so they can operate properly. We were understaffed with our Moorhead Police Department, and when you're understaffed with your Moorhead Police Department, you know, the police officers have to work harder and they have to work longer, and they don't get days off. So the city council and I, it was about 3 years ago, we finally did make enough room or enough money so we could hire enough police officers so we're fully staffed. And I'm not sure if we're fully staffed right now, but we're pretty close. And so these police officers can take vacations, they could take breaks, they could take their earned days off. So we need to fully fund the police department, and we need to make sure they're taken care of both mentally and with their pocketbooks too.
Thank you. Heather?
I like to frame it more like refunding our law enforcement, that I think that we have to look at ways to create change. We've seen that there's outcomes that are created through unjust actions, and also you know, law officers who maybe don't have the right supports that they need. One of the things that I did as my role as vice chair on the Human Rights Commission is we started the conversations in our community, because I think it's easy in Minnesota, especially because of the incident with George Floyd happening in our state. It's easy for us to think like that all Minnesota communities are like Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we're not. We're different than that. And so I really pushed to have the conversation, and Chuck came to those, and it was really eye-opening to see what our community looks like. And so for me, the biggest areas is refunding how we spend our money. You know, in Moorhead, 34 cents to the dollar of our city funding goes to law enforcement. And I would, I guess I would bring up the fact that I think that it's great that we're providing counselors or mental health support to our law enforcement officers, because they do see really horrific things. One of the stories they shared with us is we had an officer that saw, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he said 6 suicides in the first 3 months of their job. That's awful to deal with. But I also think that we need to invest in having individuals who are trained mental health specialists, substance abuse counselors, language liaisons, community supports within our law enforcement office, so that it's so that when we get calls, a lot of those individuals could be better supports than just maybe officers going all the time. I also think we need to be honest, and we need to look at accountability and implicit bias. So investing in the fact that we really want to help our officers grow professionally and be able to be open-minded to some of those implicit bias trainings, but also holding each other accountable. If we are working alongside an employee who's not doing their job right or is not keeping everybody safe, we want to be able to have a system that's able to hold each other accountable. So that's kind of where I see the refunding of policing going.
Thank you. Now, Heather, we're going to start you with a question. I've got 2 questions here on related to housing. I'm going to try to put together a little bit.
Okay.
What are your plans on helping moving seniors into affordable housing in Moorhead, especially seniors that are homeless or at risk of homelessness? And do you have any plans related to have more households moving from renting to home ownership in Moorhead?
Yep, I'll start with, as I was raised, we were raised to respect our elders. They're some of our most wisest, important community members that we have. They're the ones that tell us the stories of where we've been. And when I work with my family, as some of them transition into the older stages of their life, they're also transitioning into some of the most expensive living situations that they've been in their whole entire life, and they're not always working. I mean, when we were looking at some of the assisted housing without any medical support, it's $4,000, $5,000 a month, which is ridiculous to me. And so I think that making sure that when we talk about accessible and affordable housing, that we don't forget that our elder population is a priority in that conversation. In Moorhead here, our average rent is $839 a month. And our average income only breaks down to a little over $11 an hour. So we're not even set up in our basic housing to be supportive, and so it increases our opportunity for people to be transient in their living or even homeless. And so I do think that we need to invest in, maybe even some tiny home type of opportunities that are really affordable. You don't need to have big jumbo houses to have a good, safe living environment. So I think that we need to really look at investing in that and being able to support elders who maybe they wouldn't have to leave their home to live in a living situation or living in a senior home of some sort if we increased transportation resources. A lot of people move out of their houses because they can't go get their groceries anymore, or they can't get to their doctor's appointments anymore, that their ability to drive was really part of that decision. And so if we funded more opportunities to help our elders get around the community, they might be able to stay in their home a little bit longer and not move into that high expense living space.
Thank you. Chuck?
Yeah.
Yep, there we go. This one's complicated because it's got 2 different things at once.
Sure.
But what are your plans on helping moving seniors into affordable housing in Moorhead, especially seniors that are homeless or at risk of homelessness? And the other part of the question, because I'm putting 2 together, is do you have plans to move more households from renting to home ownership in Moorhead?
You know what, I'd support our housing through the bonding bill, just to make sure. With our 55 plus and older housing, we need more of those units too. My parents lived in a house in South Moorhead, and they could no longer take care of themselves. So there's a 55 plus housing unit on Bellesley Boulevard, and they moved into that. And when they moved into that, they had this community of people their age, and they played cards, they played pinochle, they watched movies, they did everything like that. When they moved out of that house, a young single family moved into that house, just a family that was just starting up. So I think if we can build more housing, affordable housing for some of our lower income seniors, and then 55 plus housing for more of a community housing, a lot of these seniors, and I'm getting close to 55, so I don't mean to, you know what I mean. But if we move into there, then these young families can come and take these Ramblers that are in Moorhead right now. It's more affordable housing. You get those houses between $150,000 to $200,000, which seems like a lot, but for young families just starting out, that's a good starter home. And you get plenty of these young families moving into those homes with their kids, and they survive. And if they want to upgrade sooner or later, they can do that. But I think that's a key right now to providing shelter to everybody in Moorhead right now. So and we need to take care of our senior citizens, our 55 plus or older, because there's more and more of them with the baby boomers right now. So that was one of my big things on my second council run is to, build more 55 plus housing and then get these young families in there to more affordable housing.
Thank you. Now, Chuck, you get the one on Minshore. Would you propose any changes to Minshore? If so, what? Would you sponsor legislations that would provide all Minnesotans an option to buy into Minnesota Care?
Yeah, and actually that's one of my big running points is I think Minnesota Care should be offered to every Minnesotan so you have competition with private insurers. These small businesses, if they didn't have to pay health insurance, I mean, if you had competition with MinCare, they could buy into that instead of the small businesses providing it, and I'd eliminate the income limits on it. Right now, I think it's like $51,000 for a family of four. I don't know if that's the correct figures, but I think it's close to that. Eliminate it. Make sure everybody has the option to buy into MinCare, so that these small businesses and these companies have competition where they can, if they can't provide affordable health care for their employees, they can go to MinCare. But I agree with Heather. The bottom, I think the end is universal health care, single payer health care. I think that should be a goal of ours. I grew up 5 miles from Canada, and I go back and talk to my friends from Canada, and I ask them, because I'm a politician, I ask them, what do you think? Do you like your health care? Do you like our health care? And they said, you can keep your health care. We're going to keep our health care up here. So they love their health care. No matter what you hear in the news or the talking points, my Canadian friends love their health care, and they say we can keep ours. So we need to do something. And if we followed Canada's path in their healthcare system, it really works well up there. So I think that's an end goal that we should all have.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A couple points that I would just add is, I think that having MNsure available for our low-income families at no cost is something that has to stay. We cannot lose that option. And then I do think adding the single-payer option, because I think that there's a statement that, we're not asking for everybody to have necessarily free insurance all the time. It's that when we have a single payer and there's one premium that everybody's paying, we're out of that competition. But not only that, we're all invested in one space. And so when we all put our money into one insurer, it also gives us bargaining opportunities with our pharmaceutical companies. And one of the most expensive things, it's not going to the doctor. That's always the most expensive thing. Surgeries are expensive. Long-term care is expensive. We just passed the insulin law that helps us get insulin for individuals who need that. But it's our medicines that's expensive. And so the benefit of moving to a single payer insurer is that then we have that bargaining value to be able to keep our medications low as well. I think it's a great program. I think that we need to make sure that all Minnesotans are eligible for it, whether that means, there's been a lot of changes in our citizenship opportunity for our new Americans that sometimes, getting involved in different healthcare opportunities is limited because of how the federal funding or the federal government rolls with our new American population. So just making sure that every single individual in Minnesota has access to quality care. When we work together and we keep our community safe and healthy, we're all going to grow in all different areas. And so that would be my biggest thing. I think, too, it's important to remember that some people will argue that if we go to single payer, our taxes will go up. But we have to know that if people aren't going to the doctor, they end up in our emergency room, and we have to treat them when they end up in the emergency room. And so 23% of our general fund goes towards that bill. So if we invest that money in preventative care and early screenings and healthcare options, again, we're not having people show up in the emergency rooms as often either.
Okay. We are running low on the time we told you it would be, so I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll go to closing statements. And I'm going to pick another sort of interesting question I thought that somebody put forth. Not about a specific issue. But, and Heather, you get the first crack at this one.
Okay.
How do you deal with colleagues with very different political and world views from you? Do you have an example about a time when you accomplished something by gaining the support of or bringing along a staunch conservative?
I mean, I think we've all been in situations in our life that we're working with people that we don't see eye to eye. I mean, I think that happens in our own house. I mean, we all have the opportunities to grow through change and be vocal through, disagreements. And for me, I enter situations in the mind frame to be open and build relationships and collaboration and work. Everybody has great ideas. If we all thought the same, some of us wouldn't be needed, and so it's the idea that we have to work together. For me, I think the biggest thing that I'll highlight is when I wanted to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day in our community. It started because I was working within the school district and I asked for it to be on the school calendar. We were told no, that we follow the city ordinance on different holidays, and there was a lot of conversation and pushback in that. We looked at it as an educational opportunity, not only for our school district, but for our entire community. And so I took that into consideration. I asked kind of the bigger reasons, and then what I did is I got a pretty large group of community members, and not just our Native American population, but a wide variety of community members to really help in this effort. It was a 2.5-year effort that we got pushed through Human Rights Commission and then presented to City Council, and all but one of the City Council members approved it, and so then we moved forward. So I think that's just an example of if I'm kind of met with an obstacle or I'm met with a hard no on something, it's just about building that relationship and seeing, well, how can we compromise and work together, but also then kind of not taking no for an answer and being sure to push forward with the things that I feel are important, because I believe in inclusion and I think that our underserved populations deserve to be heard. And I also believe that it was really, really important for us to acknowledge the land in which we're on, and I thought that that was important, and I didn't give up on that and just brought a lot of community members along with me.
Thank you. Chuck?
Thank you for the question, and Heather, I voted for it.
Yep.
So if people are wondering if I didn't, I did. Biggest example I can give is when I entered the Moorhead City Council. Even though it's a nonpartisan entity, we had just a mix of conservatives and liberals on there, and they weren't getting anything done. So when we came on, a new group, we started to get things done, and I've done that all my life. I've worked with people who I didn't agree with, and we've gotten a lot of things done. I think if you can find common ground, you can work well with all types, and I've worked well with conservatives and Republicans all my life. I grew up in northern Minnesota, which is very conservative. No hunting, fishing, incredible outdoors out there. They're very conservative up there, and I grew up there, but I have a lot of friends, and I worked on common ground with them. I attended Concordia, and Concordia taught me to look at different views of different people, just to take a look at people differently and look at take in what they're telling you, and just listen. Concordia taught me how to listen, which was very good. But getting back to the council again, yeah, we worked well. You could see that in Moorhead right now. We've got a lot of momentum going, which I keep mentioning. Business is upticking, our infrastructure is going. 2021, which hadn't been passed in 20 years. Everybody on the council worked to get that passed. A new transfer station, everybody voted on that, and we got that done. We're working on the 11th Street underpass. We just got a lot of things done, and we are really a mixed group of people with different ideologies and different beliefs, even though we were nonpartisan. So, like I said, I can work across the aisle. I can work with anybody. You need to find common ground, and you need to put Moorhead first, and you need to put Clay County first, and you need to work hard to make sure it's successful.
Thank you. And now we will go to 1-minute closing statements from each candidate. Chuck, you start off.
Well, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for this Voters Forum. I want to thank Heather for coming too. Appreciate the conversation. I've been a member of Moorhead City Council for 6.5 years, and we have accomplished great things here in Moorhead. I want to continue that momentum in the state legislature that Representative Lean and Senator Eakin have established, and they've done a terrific job representing Moorhead. When I was advocating for Moorhead and St. Paul and testifying in front of the House Property Tax and Local Government Division, I had Moorhead's best interest in mind. I always put Moorhead first. I want to be a representative in St. Paul, and again, thank you all for watching tonight, everybody from home, and please stay healthy. Wear a mask. Thanks.
Heather?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that the primary is coming up on Tuesday, and I also just want to mention that 55 years ago today, the Voting Rights Act was passed. And so the history behind that is that it outlawed discrimination when it came to voting. And so there's been many, many years of work for all of us to have a voice in who our elected leaders are. That's more than just Chuck and I. There's a lot of people and there's a lot of opportunities on our ballots, and the best thing that you can do is have a voice in that. So don't let the work that many people have done before for all of our voices to be heard to go to waste. So get involved, vote. Be sure that you help other people understand all the opportunities to vote. There's mail-in ballots. We want to make sure that people are safe. But for me, I just want to be a voice for inclusion. I want to be a voice to make sure that all of us are seen, all of us are heard. And if nothing else, in this time, I've just really appreciated the conversations. Again, I have a lot of respect for Chuck, and so this is just an opportunity for our community to have options and for us to show our next generation that we do all belong here. So I appreciate you all for hosting this. This has been great, and continue to reach out. I do have a Facebook page and a website that anybody can ask questions, and we do have some events coming up that anybody can participate in.
Please encourage everybody who's watching to do send in questions directly to the candidates in these last remaining days as they finish up their virtual campaigns as best they can. Like Heather mentioned, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and I've got to, as a League of Women Voters member, include that this month we will be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Women's Suffrage Amendment at last. Let's all celebrate by exercising that right to vote and picking our people. Best of luck to both of you. Thank you so much to the Moorhead Community Access Media, to all the League of Women Voters volunteers who helped put this together and get it done. And everybody stay healthy.